Finding Zasha, Chapter 31. It was almost too easy. I made it back to the room where the dogs were waiting for me with no problem. Even arriving a little early, Zasha and Thor were restless after my absence. I gave them each a hug and a kiss and then quietly let myself into the room next door. Hiding the tools would be simple. In fact, they'd be hiding in plain sight because they looked like the tools a janitor would use. There were two push carts toward the back of the room. On the lower shelf of one of them was a metal pail that held half of a dozen miscellaneous items: rags, a long-handled brush, a bottle of yellow liquid cleanser. I think there was even a screwdriver in there. Kneeling in the back of the cart, in case someone came in, I carefully extracted the saw blade and metal piece Petra had given me from my Valenki. Lifting a rag, I placed them behind it. They clattered against the metal bucket. My heart stopped, and I froze. I think one of the dogs may have barked. I stuffed Petra's dish towels behind them so that would never happen again. Later that night, when I was sure everyone was asleep, I would sneak back in here, retrieve the tools, and give them to Yosef, along with my knife. By the time I had the dogs on their leads and arrived at Axel's door, concertina in hand and letter in my pocket, I was feeling almost confident. That wouldn't last long. Axel and two other men were deep in conversation, standing over several maps on the desk. Without even looking at me, Axel said, "Sit there," and pointed to a chair by the door. "Keep the dogs on their leads." Zasha and Thor squirmed like toddlers, like little children. They made small sounds of protest that drew dark looks from Axel. 20 long minutes went by. Suddenly, Axel said something loud and angry, hit the edge of one of the maps with the back of his hand, and stomped over to the window, where he stared out, arms folded across his chest. I caught the look the two men exchanged, one of frustration tinged with fear. They rolled up their maps and were out the door without another word. "Why are you here?" Axel asked without turning around. "You asked me to be, sir. You wanted me to play for you tonight." "Then why haven't you brought the dogs?" "Can't you see? Oh, wait. Then why haven't you brought the dogs? Can't you see I'm busy now? Take them downstairs." "Oh, excuse me. Then why have you brought the dogs? Can't you see I'm busy now? Take them downstairs and be quick about it." I did as he asked. As we went down the stairs to the basement, I noticed something that I'd given a little attention to before. It was a double door that led to an outside staircase. I looked around to make sure no one was watching, then opened it. The dogs were thrilled, thinking I was taking them out for a walk. I was thrilled because it gave me an idea. It was many hours before I could try out my idea, because Axel made me play until midnight. It was exhausting. Something was definitely going on, because men went in and out all evening, talking earnestly with Axel, making notes, standing over large maps, pointing at various spots, and tracing routes with their fingers. Axel had instructed me to play slow songs very softly in the far corner of the room. It made it impossible for me to see anything specific. If only I'd been able to speak German, maybe I could have learned something valuable. But even without understanding the language, I observed other things, like Axel's terrible temper, how he often raised his voice, and how he moved slowly and with a sinister demeanor toward whomever he was talking to. All his adversaries backed off except for one. When that man, who looked intelligent and of a rank at least approaching Axel's, raised his voice in response to Axel's anger, I thought the men would come to blows. Axel won the battle after he grabbed a chair and hurled it across the room. It hit the wall and landed at the feet of one of the guards, who looked as if he might shoot it if it came any closer. Axel seemed to thrive on conflict. He looked energized and excited during and after his most intense exchanges. In contrast, I was fading, having eaten almost nothing all day, and my body now used to having meals again, but I knew better than to ask. I couldn't ask Axel if I could have some dinner. Finally, just after midnight, only Axel, a guard, and I were left in the room. Axel clapped his hands together. "Well done," he told me. "The music was a perfect backdrop for my meetings." I smiled, trying to hide my exhaustion. "Thank you, sir. I wonder if I might ask you a question." Yes. He waved a hand at me like I should hurry it up and ask. I wanted to know if I could use the door downstairs near our room to take the dogs in and out for walks and to go to the bathroom. "Why do you want to use that exit? Are you too lazy to come upstairs?" "No, sir. It's just that I want to start training the dogs to do their business outside. They're puppies, so they need to go a lot. I thought I could train them better and faster if I could bring them in and out quickly and often." To my utter surprise, he stretched his arms above his head and said, "You're a hard worker, Ivan, unlike most of your countrymen. Yes, you can use the door. There's a guard there at the ground level. I'll have one of my men talk to him so he won't shoot you by accident." He yawned and said something in German to the bodyguard who sat nearby. "And Ivan," I stopped and turned to face him, "don't think that because you work for me, it gives you any special privileges." No, I never." My cheeks grew flushed. "Dismissed. Get out." I followed the guard through the door, trying to make sense of Axel's last remark. Hadn't I already seen firsthand what he could do with a whip? Why had he found it necessary to tell me I didn't have special privileges? It was the second time I'd felt Axel was suspicious of me. The guard showed me no friendliness. He was all business when he took me outside and spoke with another guard who sat near the ground level entrance to the side stairs. That guard seemed like a man who wished he was elsewhere. I pointed to myself and said, "Ivan." He nodded his understanding and said, "Dieter," and tapped on his chest a few times. The other guard rolled his eyes as if he couldn't believe we were engaging in civilities given our different circumstances in the war. He said something to Dieter that sounded critical. To my surprise, Dieter snapped right back at him, as if he wasn't afraid. The guard stormed off. Dieter murmured something at his back that I'm sure was a curse word. When he spoke German to me, I shrugged. I shook my head to let him know I didn't understand. A big piece of our escape plan had just been put in place with the unwitting assistance of my enemy. Now, I could come and go with the dogs as I pleased, out the side door, from the basement to the ground level. I was fairly sure Dieter wouldn't trouble me, and that soon seeing me and the dogs go in and out would seem normal. That acceptance would be critical when 3 nights from now, the dogs and Joseph and I went for a late night walk. There was much work to be done before then. It would start in a few minutes when I made my first contact with Joseph. Oh my gosh, this is getting so suspenseful. Chapter 32. The hall was dark, still, and cold. I left Zasha, Thor, and my boots in our room and tiptoed into the utility room next door. I risked turning on the light because it would be impossible to dig the tools out quietly if I didn't. Wrapping my knife and the tools in Petra's dishcloth before I left served 3 purposes. It stopped the metal from clanging together. It hid them if someone found me before the transfer. And it was also my excuse for being in the hall at that hour. I'd claim I was there to clean up a mess one of the dogs had made. My nerves were steady as I reached Joseph's door. I lay down on the cold, hard floor, positioning my mouth as close to the crack under the door as possible. I whispered, "Joseph! Joseph!" There was no reply. No sound came from the room. No snoring, no rustle of movement. "Joseph!" I said a little louder, no answer. I lay quietly for 30 seconds, listening for any sound inside the room or out. With my right hand, I knocked as gently as I could. Using the knock, Petra had taught me that means I need to talk to you. There was no answer. Suddenly I was fearful that he'd been transferred somewhere else. Then I heard a little moan, the kind people make in their sleep when they roll over. Yosef, Yosef, I said again, louder this time, and then tapped rapidly on his door, using the partisan knock at least 3 times. Now there was movement inside. I knew he heard me. Yosef, Yosef, it's me, Ivan. There were more sounds from inside. I could tell Yosef was getting into position to speak to me. Ivan, what are you doing here? His lips couldn't have been more than 6 inches away from mine, although separated by an impenetrable boundary. I could hear him easily. Petra sent me, Yosef. Are you all right? I've been better. If we hadn't been in such a serious situation, I would have laughed at his bravado. What happened? Why did you go back to the house? I'd already started copying Axel's letter. I hid it in an envelope glued to the bottom of the table, but I couldn't be sure they wouldn't find it. I felt terrible when I heard this. He'd gone back so I wouldn't be in danger. You know how they are, Ivan. They don't forgive, they don't forget. Oh, Yosef, thank you. Were you able to? Don't worry. It may give me indigestion for a while, but it's gone. They found me just as I was finishing my last delicious bite. I was momentarily stunned as I realized what he was saying. Do you guys realize what he said? He ate it. He ate the copy of the letter so the Germans wouldn't find it. He ate that paper. I said thank you again, but I don't think the words could express how relieved I was. Now to what do I owe this unexpected visit? Yosef asked. We're going to get you out of here. Listen carefully. I'm going to slip 3 items under the door. Move your face away now. They're sharp. Okay. The knife went first and barely made it through the space between the floor and the bottom of the door, although it looked almost an inch high. The blade was next, and then the flat piece of metal. Oh my gosh. Did you get them all? Yes. What do I do now? It was only at that moment that I had the horrible realization that I hadn't actually seen a closet in his room. It was merely my guess, based on how apartments are laid out as a mere reflection of one another. Do you? I could barely breathe. Do you have a closet in your room? Yes. As you face the back of the room, what side is it on? The right. My relief was enormous. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. This is what I want you to do. With these 3 tools, you can dig a hole in the closet big enough to crawl into the room next door. You'll come out in a closet just like yours. All right. Tonight is Tuesday night. You've got to have it done by Friday night. Do you think you can do that? I will do that. At 10 p.m., I'll be there waiting for you. There's a janitor's uniform that you can change into. You and I will walk out of the building with 2 dogs on leads. I know the guard at the exit. I used to take the puppies on their walks. It'll probably be easier for you to sneak out with me and the dogs. The cold floor was starting to make my stomach ache. My lips kept brushing against the ragged edge of the door, and saliva collected in the corner of my mouth. Yeshka will be waiting in an alley 1.5 blocks away with warm clothes. You and Yeshka will then take separate routes to Petra's. Do you understand? Every bit. Words have never sounded so sweet. What about you? Polina will be waiting for me and the dogs. Don't worry about that. Just get the hole dug. I'm going to start right now. Yosef, wait. Do they come to your room at specific times? I don't know yet. I haven't been here long enough. I gasped, thinking I heard a sound coming from the kitchen. I have to go. Be there at 10 o'clock 3 days from now. I got up slowly, quietly, and walked on my tiptoes, my limbs stiff from lying in such an odd position on the cold floor. As I reached out to open the door to my room, someone called out, Ivan! Ah! I cried, an involuntary expression of fear. I turned around toward the cafeteria. A dim light was now on somewhere farther back in the kitchen. Fritzy stood there staring at me, a glass in his hand. He must have gotten up for a midnight snack. Even from a distance, I thought I could see a look of curiosity on his face. I held up the dish towel and said, Thor made a mess. Don't worry, I cleaned it up. Hope I didn't disturb you. Not waiting for a reply, I went into my room shaking. Had he seen me on the ground? Would he believe my story about being there at that hour? Throwing my arms around Zasha and Thor, who had gotten up to meet me, I made a soft crying sounds, though no tears came. They came from fear, relief, and fatigue. I stacked 2 chairs in front of the door, so that if Axel came in again unexpectedly in the morning, I could get the dogs out of my bed before he saw they were with me there. Then the dogs and I snuggled together under a blanket. My goodness. Ivan's certainly going through a lot, isn't he? Okay, let's see. I am going to stop, and then I'll record and post a little later.